Hello and welcome to the second 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon Reading Group series. We have the full panel reconvened here today again. Let's go over and introduce everybody. We have all the way from Utah is Narcom of Varna Nation. Narcom, how's it going?
Hi, I'm doing well. I am in quasi social distancing seclusion here in South Salt Lake.
Excellent. Well, because it's quite wet and salty, it should be quite good at stopping the spread of the virus, eh?
Probably not. We're dry, and I guess it is salty.
There you go. All the way then over from Canada. Kyle, you were supposed to be talking to somebody today who actually might have it, and you were supposed to be in a different goddamn country. What's going on?
Yeah, things are real weird. So canceled a trip down to Colorado because I didn't trust Trump's policy decisions. And didn't want to get stuck in the U.S. And
you're likely to.
Yeah. And now I'm also in semi-seclusion, semi-social distancing here in Calgary, not too far away.
Well, I thought you were going to say now you have a semi, but let's not go there. Esri, how's it going? What are you at? No sneezing, people. Actually, nobody's allowed to sneeze because I don't want to get live stream coronavirus.
That's a good point, Tom. I'm installing myself as a savior of society, essentially. I've just been in social distancing mode anyway, and everyone else is falling in line, which is good with me.
Yeah.
Just basking in the waves of social contagion from the city. You just feel the corona, I guess. I don't know. I'm thinking about going to a party tonight. I'm not sure.
That's brave.
Real brave.
Mask of the Red Death.
Yeah. Everybody salute me.
I was at on Monday. I was with my kid. There was like a free showing of Wall-E in a cinema for like schools, and we were home ed, so home ed could go as well. It was in the center of London in Shoreditch, and Tuesday morning. So Tuesday, and we were coming back to the train station like at say 1 o'clock. We were in the train station, a big like London Underground tube, open hall, like as you go in, big kind of vast tube station, and there was nobody there. And I was like, holy fuck. It was like something out all my time watching The Walking Dead and thinking about how I'd be a sniper. Finally, we're going to get a chance to enact all my plans. It's mega.
Yeah, how you doing with that? How's your aim?
Not great now. I'm only going to be taking out like a lot of like innocent people, but it's just got to happen.
Right.
Yeah,
you got to get that toilet paper.
As an American from a red state, I know how to use a gun, so I think I'm okay.
Do you have a gun, Varn?
Not anymore, but I used to. I used to pack almost all the time.
Like what?
A 22, and I used to have a shotgun, and I had a Colt 45 at one point. So that can blow, the top of someone's chest out.
Well, you know that since you become such a fan of Obama, and Michael Bloomberg, they convinced you to get rid of your guns. Now who's laughing? Goddamn liberals! Right now, we are back. Sorry, Derek's going to kill me.
Yeah, as an American, I know how to too.
Yeah, but you're far away, and like you probably just have PTSD by the time you get over here to do it to me. Now, let me see. I'm going to lose a lot of audience. All three. Now, let's share the screen here. And last week we got halfway through the first chapter, and we came to this part where Marx is now going to look at the three essential parts of the period that the book is discussing. Let's have a go. Who wants to have a go at reading, say, some of this first part? Kyle, how do you feel about it?
Sure.
Okay.
So Let us recapitulate in general outline the phases that the French Revolution went through from February 24th, 1848 to December 1851. Three main periods are unmistakable. The February period, the period of the Constitution of the Republic or the Constituent National Assembly, May 1848 to May 28, 1849, and the period of the Constitutional Republic or the Legislative National Assembly, May 28, 1849 to December 2nd, 1851. The first period, from February 24th, the overthrow of Louis Philippe, to May 4th, 1848, the meeting of the Constituent Assembly. The February period proper may be designated as the prologue of the revolution. Its character was officially expressed in the fact that the government it improvised itself declared that it was provisional. And like the government, everything that was mentioned, attempted, or enunciated during this period proclaimed itself to be only provisional. Nobody and nothing ventured to lay any claim to the right of existence and of real action. All the elements that had prepared or determined the revolution, the dynastic opposition, the Republican bourgeoisie, the Democratic Republican petty bourgeoisie, and the Social Democratic workers, provisionally found their place in the February government. It could not be otherwise. The February days originally intended an electoral reform by which the circle of the politically privileged among the possessing class itself was to be widened and the exclusive domination of the aristocracy of finance overthrown. When it came to the actual conflict, however, when the people mounted the barricades, the National Guard maintained a passive attitude. The army offered no serious resistance, and the monarchy ran away. The Republic appeared to be a matter of course. Every party construed it in its own way. Having secured it arms in hand, the proletariat impressed its stamp upon it and proclaimed it to be a social republic. There was thus indicated the general content of the modern revolution, a content which was in most singular contradiction to everything that, with the material available, with the degree of education attained by the masses, under the given circumstances and relations, could immediately be realized in practice. On the other hand, the claims of all the remaining elements that had collaborated in the February Revolution were recognized by the lion's share they obtained in the government. In no period, therefore, do we find a more confused mixture of high-flown phrases and actual uncertainty and clumsiness, of more enthusiastic striving for innovation and more deeply rooted domination of the old routine, of more apparent harmony of the whole of society, and more profound estrangement of its elements. While the Paris proletariat still reveled in the vision of the wide prospects that had opened before it, and indulged in seriously meant discussions of social problems, the old powers of society had grouped themselves, assembled, reflected, and found unexpected support in the mass of the nation, the peasants and petty bourgeois, who all at once stormed onto the political stage after the barriers of the July monarchy had fallen.
Okay, so how much of what Marx is describing here is a function of the historical memory of the First French Revolution and what happened there?
I mean, we could start with barricades.
Well, I'm talking more about the kind of the history of the terror and stuff that after the initial revolution, nobody wanted to be dynamic. They just wanted to wait and have everything confirmed in an election and a vote. And that it seemed like that the memory of the original revolution took the dynamism from this revolution.
Yeah, but I think Marx probably also has a point in that the social composition of the Revolutionary Party was very motley, and that did undermine what it was like. It did undermine it even trying to formulate something beyond reviving the memory of the French Revolution, the first one.
Right. I mean, and we have to put into context that the other European countries in 1848, which he's not writing about, had similar motley revolutions, and Marx definitely experienced that firsthand. There's no way around that. Like,
but a question for you is: was the first French Revolution not motley also?
Yeah, it was. But well, okay. So this is where it's a little bit vaguer. There was no real like the proletariat question in the First Revolution is like the proletariat question in the American Revolution. There kind of isn't one. Like, there's not a large wage owning class. The dispossessed classes of the First French Revolution, it's hard to say that they were actually proletariat. Does anyone disagree with me on that? Because they, like, the factories and all that weren't really there under the French absolutist system, not in the same way.
Yeah, I think that's right. And like, there were certainly radical artisans, but that's not the same thing as proletarians.
Right. Like when the League of the Just comes out and it turns into the Communist League, Engels writes that the leadership of the radical factions in France and in Germany were all radicalized artisans, but the proletarian class was really only emerging in Germany and existed in England, and that was about it.
Were they not radicalized in response to the capitalist system emerging in England and pressure on their jobs? Was it not like a function of capitalism that they got radicalized?
Well, it was a function of the absolutist French state trying to outcompete capitalism, being unable to do it in the way it was organized. Because there's no and I'm gonna be out myself as a total Robert Brennerite on this, but it seems to me that the French absolute system, like the Spanish absolutist system, had to reinvest so much money into extraction and outright dominion that it couldn't reinvest into making its production more efficient, and thus couldn't outcompete the capitalists and had to have way too much of a tax base. That's the general theory that Robert Brenner has for why, like, Spain and France's, absolutist attempt to overcome feudal contradictions ended up like being too weighty and kind of collapsing. They are actually modernist attempts. They're not truly feudal. Like, absolutism is actually kind of a unique attempt to fix it. Banerjee, the Indian Marxist, also talks about this and why the Spanish Empire didn't have the same fate as the U.S. because of the model it was based off of being similar. So, properly speaking, yes, they're radicalized by the emergence of the capitalist system, but they are not yet proletarian. The French bourgeois revolution is really what creates a mass proletarian class in France.
Yeah, and speaking of the barricades, that's actually a later development in the early 19th century, right? When they overthrow the Bourbons. I think that was when the Paris barricades became like a proper tactical program.
Yeah, that was the 1814 revolution, was it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, my only point with barricades is it's not as if this is a neutral kind of abstract form that comes about. It's a sort of cultural inheritance. But
totally.
I think without knowing enough about the history, the Brennerite take on this sort of thing resonates with me. There's a sense in which it's like the old French Revolution is like proto-proletarian or something. This is
Yeah, it's interesting because the street fighters of Paris in the French Revolution kind of come to take on a proletarian image in later memory, right? We kind of lump them in with the proletariat, the sans-culottes and stuff. But they're not actually proletarians.
I mean, yes, this isn't so much Brennerite as it is true.
Right. I mean, well, it's both. The Britanite is the larger historiographical framing. The truth of the class composition, I think, is like kind of undeniable. But there's a problem with that in all the revolutions that we want to talk about, because also the Chinese and Russian revolutions weren't really led by proletariat that much either. Their armies were largely, at least in Russian, maybe 60% peasant, even though the proletarians really were like pretty much all on board. But the Chinese case, like I think it was like mostly a peasant army.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, does anybody want to talk about this sentence here I've underlined? Let me just read it for us, talk to this one specifically. There was thus indicated the general content of the modern revolution, a content which was in most singular contradiction to everything that, with the material available, with the degree of education attained by the masses under the given circumstances and relations, could be immediately realized in practice. So what's he saying here? Is he saying that like the proles could never have got anywhere? Is that essentially what he's saying?
Yeah, pretty much. I think we kind of see this even in the commune later, when the sort of the Blanquists kind of seize control of the commune by the end, just because they have organization, they have a degree of education that isn't held by the masses.
It seems to me kind of unusual that Marx thought there would be actually communist revolution in his lifetime, like a successful one. Or did he actually think that, given like that most countries weren't going to be that developed proles?
It really depends on what time period you're reading Marx from and how much you extrapolate early stuff into later stuff. Because by the time you're reading Capital, and during his writings, in the Critique of the Goethe program, he doesn't seem to sound like it's that close. But in the stuff before, like in the stuff pre 1848, I think he thinks 1848 is it. I really do.
Yeah, this is something that he thinks is coming during his lifetime, for most of his lifetime. And then when he gets old, he's like, yeah, maybe it'll be in like, like
50 to 100 years, I think maybe is what he probably thought.
Yeah. His time frame is not our time frame.
And in the sort of later phase of his life, that was during a kind of definite ebbing of revolutionary activity in Europe as well.
Right. I mean, and there's kind of like an almost Thomas Aquinian like pessimism to the end of Marx's life, because I mean he basically like just puts down the Capital volumes and then doesn't really do anything but write letters to Engels for like 10 years and like kind of keeps up with the SPD.
Anthropological notebooks.
Yeah. Weird math notebooks, stuff like that. But like,
oh yeah.
But like he really sort of like just since to send letters to weigh in on goings on in the SPD.
Did he not have a stroke or something as well, though?
Oh, he had bad health problems. Like, so you don't know like how much that's reflected in the letters, and I don't want to get too like bringing Marx's personal life into ideas, but it is fascinating to me that like when you read the letters to Vera Zurlich, he doesn't sound as sure that it's going to be immediate, but he does think that's the only path that Europe can go. And he's also no longer sounds as Whiggish that that's going to be the developmental pattern for the whole of the world, which he does early on. Because earlier Marx does have some like Whiggish tendencies, like he almost thinks colonialism is progressive at first and all that.
Okay, well, let's go. Esri, how do you feel about reading the next part? Worth calling, Esri.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but I
Hello?
couldn't at the start. Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, give me 20 seconds.
Okay, I'll read this one. I don't mind. I'll read this part. Okay. Okay. The second period, from May 4th, 1848 to the end of May 1849, is the period of the Constitution, the foundation of the bourgeois republic. Immediately after the February days had not only the dynastic opposition be surprised by the Republicans and the Republicans by the Socialists, but all France by Paris. The National Assembly, which met on the 4th of May 1848, had emerged from the national elections and represented the nation. It was a living protest against the pretensions of the February days and was to reduce the results of the revolution to the bourgeois scale. In vain, the Paris proletariat, which immediately grasped the character of this National Assembly, attempted on May the 15th, a few days after it met, to negate its existence forcibly, to dissolve it, to disintegrate again into its constituent parts the organic form in which the proletariat was threatened by the reacting spirit of the nation. As is known, May 15th had no other result but that of removing Blanqui and his comrades, that is, the real leaders of the Proletarian Party, from the public stage for their entire duration of the cycle we are considering. Okay, people might remember we discussed Blanqui in the Mike McNair reading group strategy. He was kind of like the benevolent socialist dictator dude from Marx's time. Okay.
It surprised me to see Blanqui getting the shout out from Marx as the real leader of the Proletarian Party.
Oh,
yeah,
he was. I think that the debates between Blanquists and Marxists have to do with tactics, not with Blanqui's role in the French Revolution.
Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going. If I can. The bourgeois monarchy of Louis Philippe. These reading group series might go really down the swan when we all get coronavirus. We'll have to get like one of those Stephen Hawking's voice things to do it. That'd be fun.
Jesus Christ, Tom.
That'd be really good. The bourgeoisie monarchy of Louis Philippe. Sorry, let me go. The bourgeoisie monarchy of Louis Philippe can be followed only by a bourgeois republic. That is to say, whereas a limited section of the bourgeoisie ruled in the name of the king, the whole of the bourgeoisie will now rule in the name of the people. The demands of the Paris proletariat are utopian nonsense, to which an end must be put. To this declaration of the Constituent National Assembly, the Paris proletariat replied with the June insurrection, the most colossal event in the history of European civil wars. The bourgeois republic triumphed. On its side stood the aristocracy of finance, the industrial bourgeoisie, the middle class, the petty bourgeois, the army, the lumpen proletariat organized as the mobile guard, the intellectual lights, the clergy, and the rural population. On the side of the Paris proletariat stood none but itself. More than 3,000 insurgents were butchered after the victory, and 15,000 were deported without trial. With this defeat, the proletariat passes into the background on the revolutionary stage. It attempts to press forward again on every occasion as soon as the movement appears to make a fresh start, but with ever decreased expenditure of strength and always slighter results. As soon as one of the social strata above it gets into revolutionary ferment, the proletariat enters into an alliance with it and so shares all the defeats that the different parties suffer one after another. But these subsequent blows become the weaker, the greater the surface of society over which they are distributed. The more important leaders of the proletariat in the assembly and in the press successively fall victim to the courts, and ever more equivocal figures come to head it. In part, it throws itself into doctrinaire experiments, exchange banks, and workers' associations, hence into a movement in which it renounces the revolutionizing of the old world by means of the latter's own great combined resources, and seeks rather to achieve its salvation behind society's back in private fashion, with its limited conditions of existence, and hence necessarily suffers shipwreck. It seems to be unable to either to rediscover revolutionary greatness in itself or to win new energy from the connections newly entered into, until all classes with which it contended entomb themselves lie prostrate beside it. But at least it succumbs with the honours of the great world historic struggle. Not only France, but all Europe trembles at the June earthquake, while the ensuing defeats of the upper classes are so cheaply bought that they require barefaced exaggeration by the victorious party to be able to pass for events at all, and become the more ignominious the further the defeated party is removed from the proletarian party.
Let the record show that you said prostate instead of prostrate. You might want to re-record
Prostrate,
that.
yeah, let me find that. Where did I say it? Prostrate. There you go. In June, themselves lie prostrate beside it. Okay. That is a goddamn, like, that paragraph is that the greatest paragraph ever written on history?
It's kind of a depressing paragraph about the proletarian leadership, like, sinking into doctrinaire experiments and utopian, like, oblivion, basically. Just,
So,
sinking
like,
back into the scene.
What we see all the time.
Yeah. This is very familiar. Very familiar.
Okay, 2 words for you. Gar Alparovitz. Anybody know Gar Alparovitz?
Yeah.
This is Gar Alparovitz.
Familiar.
He's like a guy who's written. He's like I think he's an economist who writes stuff on, like, how in America, there's so many cooperatives now, and worker-owned co-ops, that it's like revolution through the back door. Like, Chomsky's always talking about him.
We did this on Swampside. We did this guy. Oh God, I just.
Oh yeah. It's like the same people who get all like a love boner from Madragon. And even some Marxists do this. Like Richard Wright does this too.
Richard Wolff,
yeah. Sorry, not Richard Wright. He's a black author who's dead. Richard Wolff is not dead. I met him in Boise. All right.
I think Richard Wright also played defense for Liverpool in the 80s. Just thought I'd say that.
Maybe different Richard Wright.
Maybe not. I've killed everything. I've killed everything.
You just gave me coronavirus, Tom.
It's like the first time I've ever mentioned sport and everybody just died. What a group of nerds.
Sorry, Tom, you mentioned canceled.
You mentioned not only sport, you mentioned British sport, which like we could give 2 shits about.
Well,
hey, I listen to British stand-up comedy. I have a passing acquaintance with some terms of cricket.
Kyle is in the colony still. They probably watch British sport.
Actually, you'd be surprised how little we watch British sport. Because the cultural supremacy and domination was handed over quite officially, semi-officially, from the British to the Americans during the end of the Second World War and slightly thereafter. So Canada became, very America-focused and not British-focused. You go to somewhere like New Zealand, and it's a very different story. They're still totally 100% into British stuff there.
Yeah, you just have the NHL suspended games as a country.
No, it's all
your national
off.
Character is sad.
I mean, I was in the car the other day, and we were going to the airport to fly down to Colorado. We heard that hockey practice was suspended for the whole league, and we were like, "Oh no, it's real now."
That was my response too. And the NBA and the NFL were like, "Nope." That was wow.
I come from the state that literally has the major like patient zero for our state is actually the reason the NBA canceled. So lovely.
Jazz.
Yeah.
Jazz, yeah.
Yeah. Like it affected me personally.
Oh my God.
No, it really did affect me personally. Like, not just that, everyone calls it lockdown. So yeah, I hate sports right now with a passion. It's not very pro of me though. There's few things more pro-y than giving a shit about meaningless things that like sports, but whatever.
Well, consider the role of the individual in history. All right. You look at that guy that touched all the mics in the Utah Jazz. There.
I hate you.
Okay, let's get back to the goddamn
No
text.
problem.
Yeah.
Oh, the Irishman's going to talk to us about getting back to the text. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
And we're all too diseased to focus.
We're at a low ebb today here, a low ebb. Okay. So basically, when the election came back in, the parliament that came back from the first elections was a lot more conservative than the revolutionaries who led it. And the proles in Paris pretty much figured this out pretty much straight away, and they decided to basically have another secondary revolution. And they got absolutely goddamn slaughtered, worse than anything that was ever done in the terror or anything like that. But it's not remembered. It's funny why it's not remembered. Why do people think it's not remembered?
Because go ahead, Kyle.
I think it's overshadowed by the Commune.
Yeah, exactly.
The massacre of the Commune is something that people aren't going to forget.
I think it gets over. It's because it's sandwiched between the first revolutionary terror, and that goes in every direction. And then you have the massacre of the Commune in the third French Revolution, that this massacre is completely lost.
But I would go so far as to say, like, non-Marxist types, like just normal people, have no idea of the Paris Commune.
But they have no idea about anything other than the terror, and they don't even know that the terror was aimed at the left of the Jacobins either.
Tom is asking Tom's asking a larger ideological question of why, That
was a sarcastic one, but yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, let's talk about this for a second. Even though 1848 revolutions are arguably the founding revolutions of the modern world, no one fucking remembers them, whatever.
No, just us.
Yeah, I mean, like when you take, they're like a small footnote in AP European history. Like, that's
yeah. Well, because they were so abortive, it's like they were a flash in the pan, right?
They were successful failures, weren't they?
Yeah.
They create modern liberalism.
And they also create almost all the modern European nation states except for France and England. So it's like...
Yeah. They're really consequential. It's just like kind of inherently deflationary.
Yes.
And I think they kind of only... It's interesting. They kind of only explicitly frame subsequent history for leftists, but they really do frame the terms of debate going forward for pretty much everyone.
Like, I think successful failures might be my favorite description I have of liberals. Sorry, I just thought I should really kind of maybe think.
Well, you look at the German left during this period, and it's truly shambolic. Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing was a disaster.
Well, let's have a look more into this. So, the sentence he starts off with here is the bourgeois monarchy of Louis Philippe can only be followed by a bourgeois republic. So is that a law by Marx?
No. This is like speaking with the voice of the bourgeoisie. That's like when he switches to this declaration of the Constituent National Assembly, the Paris proletariat replied with the June insurrection. He's kind of framing that previous statement as like, well, this is the sort of common sense of the bourgeoisie, and this is what the proletariats did in response. The proletariat didn't respond.
Yeah, he's throwing his voice. Or maybe not. You don't think so?
I'm not sure.
I think this is...
Maybe not. Let's chew on this.
I really think this is Marx throwing his voice, as you said.
I don't know. I mean...
The utopia, let's look at the next statement. The demands of the Paris proletariat are utopian nonsense. To which
I feel it's kind of like...
is that not Marx throwing his voice?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I kind of feel like he's saying something like, you know that the bourgeois monarchy pretty much has to be followed by something like that on, you know, on average. And, you know, like that's the kind of step that you should expect. Now, I don't think it's a hard rule where he's saying like it definitely has to go next, but like
I don't. Yeah,
the development.
It
And
is
he's saying
somewhat
it-
ambiguous. I do think though that like when we look at the whole thing about the poetry of the past and the poetry of the future, you know, there's a way in which going to a bourgeois republic would kind of be reiterating the phase of the first revolution, right? It's not exactly the same because at that point they didn't have a bourgeois monarchy, but it's still kind of falling into a similar pattern. The interesting thing, though, is that he does say in the previous section that the proletariat was not ready to rule. So there's a real ambiguity here in terms of what is being said.
Well, let's go back to the ambiguity about Marx and like bourgeois revolution in general, right? Because that's an ambiguity that he has going all the way back to the 1848 revolutions, where he does see the bourgeois, you know, subjectitude as highly revolutionary, and the early bourgeois thinkers and revolutions he actually praises a lot. I mean, think about when he compares Adam Smith to Prohune and like talks about how degenerate the later bourgeois, you know, petty bourgeois thinkers were. But it's also hard to square with stuff Marx says in other places. Like I mentioned those letters to Vera Zorlich because they're really, really, they kind of take the singular teleology of all history out of Marx. But maybe we should really go into this paragraph before we really discuss it. Do you want me to read it, Tom?
Well, I just kind of wanted to discuss a little bit more first. Just this bit here. Okay, let me just read this line here. Mm-hmm. On its side stood the aristocracy of finance, the industrial bourgeoisie, the middle class, the petty bourgeois, the army, the lumpen proletariat organizes the mobile guard, the intellectual lights, the clergy, and the rural population. You know, sometimes people, you know, and certainly I'm kind of guilty of it, you know, saying, oh, it's the workers and the capitalists. Like Marx is not a crude class. He doesn't have a crude analysis of class. Like sometimes I know we always shout out Mike Duncan's podcast, but he sometimes, I think, says that Marx has quite a crude understanding of the classes and how people act.
Yeah, well, I think that's because he's offering off a liberal historiography of Marx and not actually dealing with how complicated this is. Because most Marxists, frankly, even a lot of good ones, don't. I mean, when he points out that like the aristocracy of finance is separate from the industrial bourgeoisie, and that the non-industrial bourgeoisie by implication is also separate from the industrial bourgeoisie, that the middle class, whatever that is, the petty bourgeoisie, the army, and the lumpen proletariat are all organized in certain, you know, in the mobile guard, that there's actually a whole lot going on. One of the problems that I had when I tried to systematize Marx, because I always thought Marx was systematizable, and everyone talks about how all of his classes are defined by production, and for the most part, they kind of are. But actually, they're not. Like, it's not actually that clear. So, like, if you define the working class and the bourgeoisie are defined by their role in production, the lumpen aren't, clergy aren't. What counts as lumpen isn't, and that's like something that Marx kind of under theolizes and just sort of accepts. Well, intellectual,
clergy kind of are, really, aren't they? They're an ideological class.
But what about the intellectual leaders? Like, what? The thing is, if they're an ideological class, they're not a productive class.
I don't think ideological class is what's being stated here. The clergy had a specific relationship with the state. So if it's not ideological so much as it is, there's like political niches.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what I mean. I think, you know, like it's some kind of weird, like it's a
relationship
class.
to state. It's a relationship to state power, though. It's not a relationship to ideas.
But also a relationship to their own material, holding on to their you know, literally their abbeys and their land and all that. So it does have a kind of production relation as well.
Well, the one that's more actually questionable.
If you're going to try to,
Yeah, like intellectual lights. Who do they clearly like? Yeah, they have patrons, but their patrons are all over the place. They don't have a singular, clear class interest. So, like, listing off the class interests like this actually indicates that, like, in this one scenario, almost everybody, but maybe the peasants, although they kind of are too, if you actually read the history, are against the proletariat in France. Like all the other classes. And if you read the manifesto, for example, a lot of those classes, including the petty bourgeois, are easily proletarianized. Like their interest could be in the interest of the proletariat, but at that moment, they are not. And that's kind of huge.
So I really like the bit. Now we talked a bit earlier about, talking about going behind people's backs and organizing. Like, is that not just, the rejection of politics, of anarchism or stuff like, that's kind of a very key criticism of modern left. It's just, when I read this, every time I read this bit about, trying to achieve the revolution behind its back, that's kind of, is that not just the most damning statement about modern leftism?
Well, modern
NGOism
leftism tends to be either technocratic or Blanquist, frankly. Or Lassallean, which, doesn't come up in Dick's text, but comes up elsewhere. And those are all ways to try to backdoor through. Lassalleanism tries to piggyback on the development of a national bourgeoisie and a national state. Blanquism tries to do it by basically a covert terror campaign, just like Bakutanism does. The others are like they're all kind of one neat trick views, like the NGO view. That's like, we're just gonna kind of NGO our way till we deal with this one issue, and then somehow impossibilist up when that fails, or when we get it, we can switch and show our real agenda. But like, honestly, and I know my Leninist listeners and know my ambivalence about Lenin, but like that's the lesson most people learn from Lenin, kind of, even though the Bolsheviks didn't do it that way, ironically. That seems to be what everyone thinks we should do, is it's always some trick.
Okay, sorry, I had muted there. I was looking for my mute button. Okay, well, we go on to the next paragraph. Derek, did you say you wanted to read the next one?
I do have one thing to say. If we're gonna pivot, I do have one thing to say about Mike Duncan, is that his analysis changes when he does the Haitian Revolution. That like changes him as a thinker, and like in terms of explaining like revolutions and that sort of thing. And it also changes the way he looks at Marx and Marxism.
Right.
Mike Duncan, I think at first he has an intelligent axe to grind with the Marxist tradition for making like history, very neat and simple when it's not. And when he actually like encounters more Marx and he's like chewing on an actual slave revolt, he can detach like a Marxian analysis from the Marxist historical tradition. And the people, I could hear your, there you go. The people that really hate Duncan are the ones that are very attached to the Marxist historical writing tradition.
The people who have the neat typological and teleological schemas who really hate that, like
history
and like for example, like Duncan's reading of the English Revolution actually kind of fits with Marx a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily fit with the clean. This was the first step in the long progression towards communism.
And I don't think he knows that when he started the Revolution series.
Yeah, no, Duncan was like a big liberal when he started the Revolution series, and he really shifted over time.
Because I'm still going through the earlier stuff, so he's like, some of the French Revolution stuff to me was like, I was like, goddamn liberal, calling like the mob and all this stuff. It really jarred with me listening to it. Yeah,
he gets better on the later French revolutions, and by the Haitian Revolution seems to really change his historiography. And also, I also think he was a liberal, but he was also coming from the perspective of understanding Roman history. And he also seems to understand Roman history a lot better. Like he also finished his graduate courses work while revolutions was really being developed. Right. So he has a much more advanced historiography in the later ones because he writes them, I think, after. I don't know if he wrote the early ones before or during. So yeah, but so yeah, in defense of Mike Duncan, because I also think like it. There are better stuff that you can read, but if you're new to the history and you just want to get it down, like to me, like Duncan's better than saying like I don't know, wading through a bunch of Simon Schema books and then going and reading Marx and stuff and then coming to some kind of intelligent conclusion about it.
No, it's better than Marxist pamphlet brain, and just like reading, what your guru tells you to read. It's better.
Absolutely.
Or reading liberal popular works on it that are often pretty
totally
bad are weird.
But we're already skeptical of those things as Marxists.
Right. Well, yeah, but I don't know that there are some overclaims that are interesting. Like I remember Zizek was posting this book where maybe like the terror wasn't that bad. It didn't kill as many people as the American Revolution, and I was like, because the American Revolution was a war, and B, you're not actually you're not including in those numbers the war in the Vendée, so you're being sketchy as that. So like, come on. But yeah. So
let's move on. Derek, did you say you want to read this next paragraph?
Sure.
Let's do it in a finite speed.
All right. So this is the defeat of the June insurgents?
Correct.
The defeat of the June insurgents, to be sure, had now had leveled the ground on which the bourgeois republic could be founded and built up. But it had shown at the same time that in Europe, that the questions at issue are other than the republic or monarchy. It revealed here that bourgeois republic signifies unlimited despotism of one class over other classes. It proved in the countries with an older civilization, with a developed formation of classes, with modern conditions of production, and with the intellectual consciousness and all the traditional ideas have been dissolved by the work of centuries. The republic signifies, in general, the only political form of revolution of bourgeois society, and not its conservative form of life, as, for example, in the United States of North America, where, though classes already exist, they had not yet become fixed, but continuously change and interchange their elements in constant flux, where the modern means of production, instead of coinciding with a stagnant surplus population, rather compensate for the relative deficiency of hands and heads, and where, finally, the feverish, youthful movements of production, where they make the new world on its own, had left neither time nor opportunity for abolishing the old world spirit.
Yeah, okay. Let's chew on this a bit. This is
where he talks. This is where one of the few times Marx talks about North America that isn't like done. Because most of them are done by Engels, who says similar things, but usually says them clearer and more developedly. But yeah. So what is he saying there? That the reason why the North American revolutions did not do this is because the classes in North America are not as fixed, because basically the conditions of settler colonialism means that like there's new influxes of production material all the time, and there's not enough people. So yes. There's not a clear surplus of people creating these class pressures that there is in Europe.
Yep.
Even though like he's not articulated in terms of settler colonialism, it's implied.
Yeah, and it squares with what is said in the last chapter of Capital Volume 1, right?
Yeah, I agree. So
could you elaborate on that point?
Oh, there's just the chapter on basically cases where, like, basically settler colonial cases where the opportunity for material expansion outward, outside of the grasp of sort of like structured class society, of the European form allows for a kind of different. It allows for sort of like petty production, that kind of like Jeffersonian sort of ideal, but also just like a bit of an escape from the pressures of capitalism in the immediate, and eventually that freedom will be curtailed by the expansion of production.
Right, because eventually we'll run out of land to buy off production time for. And what I always talk about, the America had a class of the bourgeois and the class and the party of the proto-bourgeois or the populist party, because and that was true in most of the colonial places actually, because the land illusion gave this ability for people to believe that they were yeoman small producers. So like this weird class formation that doesn't really exist even in Europe outside of England for very long. And because we could just throw land at people by taking it from other people, that was a possibility. And also because of slavery holdings, doing this weird like antique production mode in the middle of industrialization, which made it particularly brutal. And Engels states all this like more explicitly than Marx does. Marx kind of talks about it as like a holdover of land problems, but Engels like goes into like, well, most Americans don't really see themselves as proletariat because they have this land to believe that they're a yeoman class, and they come from this English tradition that existed just prior, but isn't really a true thing in England, but kind of can be true in the United States for now, but won't be forever.
Where does he write these? What books or letters is that in?
Engels writes it in letters. Letters about the States. So
to anyone in particular, or
let me find it real fast. Hold on. Someone.
I'll put you on. How about I put you on mute, and then we'll read the last paragraph. Unless there's anything else
I want to read.
Yeah, I was going to give it to you.
Well, yay. Well, let's see. The idea that like I don't know. This is one of the few times you really see Marx talking about like classes in flux, and it's I don't know. I wish he wrote more about it. It's an interesting thought world. Anyway,
I want to say actually, I'd like to say something else as well. It's like I really like the fact that he just says it very plainly here. It reveals that here the bourgeois republic signifies the unlimited despotism of one class over the others. I think that's got to be. You look around today, you look at what's happening with the coronavirus, how they're reacting, where the market is more important than the lives. And it's an explicit despotism over other people. It's kind of shocking.
Sometimes when I go on about like bourgeois institutions being qualitatively different, and capitalist class society having like a specific character, people mistake it for me being like, oh, these things are really meaningfully like meaningfully democratic and like in a way that I would stand by. But I mean, these are still class society institutions, and there's still that basic divide. And ultimately, bourgeois society recreates this it's really the least explicit kind of despotism that's ever existed, but it is still like that.
Yeah, and it's also true that 1848 is the moment which very clearly lays this out, right? This is the like kind of the definitive end of the heroic phase of the bourgeoisie in Europe.
Right, but we still have a little bit of heroicism left in the Americas. However, I found the letter. All right, so there was a series of letters between Engels and Serge talking about like the hopes for a social democratic party in America and why it hadn't happened there, even though they always talk about stuff that they had in America that like the Lassalleans try to bring in, and they're kind of pathetic. And it was Serge and Kautsky talking together, and I'll read the specific. He was writing from London in 1892, and he talked to a lot of Americans to do it. And he was talking about also the ossification of the two parties in America. So this is actually it hits on all of it. There is no place yet in America for a third party, I believe. The divergence of interest in the same class group is so great that in tremendous areas, the wholly different groups and interests are represented by each of the two big parties, depending on the locality, and that each particular section of the possession class has its representatives in each of the two parties to a large degree. Today, big industry forms the core of the Republicans on the whole, and the big landowners from the South form the Democrats. The apparent haphazardness of this jumbling together is what provides the splendid soil for the corruption and plundering of the government that will flourish there so beautifully. Only when the public land, is completely in the hands of speculators and the settlement of the land has become more difficult or falls prey to gouging, only then, I think, will the time come with peaceful development for a third party. Land is the basis of speculation, and the American speculative mania and speculative opportunity are chief levers which hold the native-born worker in bondage to the bourgeoisie. Only when there is a generation of native-born workers that cannot expect anything from speculation, that's a side note, will there be any more that we have solid a foothold in America, but of course, who can count on peaceful development in America? There are economic jumps there, like political ones in France, to be sure. They produce only momentarily retrogressions. The small farmer and the petty bourgeois will hardly ever succeed in forming a strong party. They consist of elements that change too rapidly. The farmer is the migratory farmer, farming 2 or 3 or 4 farms in succession in different stages and territories. Immigration and bankruptcy promote this change in personnel and economic dependence upon a creditor who hampers independence, but also make up for the splendid element of politicians who speculate on their discontent in order to sell them to one of the big parties afterwards. The tendency of Yankees who are rehashing the greenback humbug is to result their theoretical backwardness and their Anglo-Saxon contempt for all theory. They are punished for this by superstitious belief in every philosophical and economic absurdity, by various religious sectarianisms, and by idiotic economic experiments, out of which, however, certain bourgeois cliques will always profit. And there's another letter where he talks about the yeoman farmer thing in more detail, but that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
So they saw it. They saw it.
Yeah.
That's a quote I was hawking around during the 2016 election to people, and it really
how much were you selling for that? How much are people paying you for that?
No, it's made their hair stand on end because it resonates. Although, what is this greenback humbug? Isn't that like paper money?
Yeah,
yeah.
That's the greenback.
Yeah, that'll never work.
Yeah.
Greenback humbug, paper money, and also MMT.
Oh yeah, we're going to see.
Don't forget bringing back the silver standard or bimetallicism, another great one from that era.
Absolutely. Okay, let's it's really good stuff.
Ready to read?
Let's move it on.
All right, here we are. During the June days, all classes and parties had united in the party of order against the proletarian class as the party of anarchy, of socialism, of communism. They had saved society from the enemies of society. They had given out the watchwords of the old society: property, family, religion, order, to their army as passwords, and had proclaimed to the counter-revolutionary crusaders, "In this sign thou shalt conquer." From that moment, as soon as one of the numerous parties which gathered under this sign against the June insurgents seeks to hold the revolutionary battlefield in its own class interest, it goes down before the cry: property, family, religion, order. Society is saved just as often as the circle of its rulers contracts, as a more exclusive interest is maintained against a wider one. Every demand of the simplest bourgeois financial reform, of the most ordinary liberalism, of the most formal republicanism, of the most shallow democracy, is simultaneously castigated as an attempt on society and stigmatized as socialism. And finally, the high priests of religion and order themselves are driven with kicks from their Pythian tripods, hauled out of their beds in the darkness of night, put in prison vans, thrown in dungeons, or sent into exile. Their temple is razed to the ground, their mouths are sealed, their pens broken, their law torn to pieces in the name of religion, of property, of the family, of order. Bourgeois fanatics for order are shot down on their balconies by mobs of drunken soldiers, their domestic sanctuaries profaned, their houses bombarded for amusement in the name of property, of the family, of order. Finally, the scum of bourgeois society forms the holy phalanx of order, and the hero Krapulinski installs himself in the Tuileries as the savior of society.
Booyakasha. I'm telling you, Kyle, the Esri has really laid the gauntlet down to your reading style. I can't wait to see what you're going to have to do to come back.
Yeah,
There's no French here, so it was all good.
I think
this is my favorite paragraph of Marx, probably. You asked before, good. Tom.
Yeah. Literally, it's every paragraph in this goddamn opening chapter I go, that's the best one ever. Yeah. Like, it's very hard, like, reading the stuff about everything is socialism or communism after going through the British election there last year. It's just like, literally, it's exactly like what was said.
So I wanted to, because I have some anti-political stuff on my mind. This whole like Marxist valorization of society, though, seems to be like kind of not a thing here. Like he's like.
What do you mean, Derek? Explain that.
Marx doesn't valorize society here. The saviors of society are the bad guys. Like,
the society becomes a conservative watchword.
Like Marx sees a tendency to focus on society and social order, not just political order, as a conservative tendency.
Which would make sense because all of history is, the movement of class struggle. It's a series of modes of production. Like that makes sense.
Kyle, do you have anything to say on this final paragraph?
I mean, aside from the excellent formal structure it's got, and really showing the logic of the bourgeois strategy and like how it successively defeats itself again and again until finally we get autocracy. That's really impressive. I think another thing is that I just wanted to mention this character Krapulinski. He comes from this poem, The Two Knights. He's basically as it says here, a dissolute aristocrat, but he's like a Pole who's been kicked out of Poland and just kind of in his cups and despairing about life, but saying, "Oh yeah, it'll eventually work out. We'll get Poland back someday. Our sons will get it for us." And of course, he's referring here to Louis Bonaparte here, right? Who was also a dissolute aristocrat of a sort, right? He's known for gambling, as was mentioned earlier in the text. He was kind of a reformer in a sort of Saint Simonian way, but really was a bit of a figure of fun. And like his previous attempts at any kind of like seizing of power were very comedic in how, just haphazard they were.
Right. And while I often don't agree with vulgar Marxist reading of fascism, I will say one of the interesting things that they see in both Marxist authoritarianism, i.e. Stalinism, because they, Trotskyists call that Bonapartism, and also in fascist and right populist authoritarianism, which get called Bonapartism, is that it often is from this sort of like deracinated elements of society that form their parapolitical base. And that a lot of these figures are also clownish when they first emerge and then end up killing a bunch of people.
The interesting thing, though, as well from that is that, like, the Bonaparte or whoever comes through, like, even though the bourgeoisie lost kind of control, they were still happy with them. They could get on with doing their business. And, you know, if we look at, say, Stalin, like, the actual, like, communists or the socialists, even though they had their problems with him, they were probably happy that he was going to, even in a clownish fashion, do the things that they wanted. You know, there's something kind of, I don't know, parallel about the two situations. What do people think?
Yeah, the class composition is different because Stalin is like liquidating a bunch of these classes, like, you know, literally doing like some like mass murder to like get rid of them.
Coming up on the back.
But strangely, that obscures this dynamic that is totally there. I don't know, because I agree with you, but in order to make this argument, you have to basically talk about the way that the Soviet Union tries to substitute for those classes, you know, like the state, like especially the Stalinist apparatus, like
but they also
it's most monarchical.
But they also emerged from those classes. Like, this is the other thing you have to look at with that element of the Bolshevik leadership. They come from the classes that they're complaining about, almost to a man. They almost all come from relatively well-off peasant backgrounds and stuff like that. Now, I don't believe that your birth class is totally dependent on, you know, totally determinant on your personality or whatever, but that is not lost on me. And the other thing about Soviet society, and one of the reasons why I think a simple state capitalism argument doesn't really hold for it, and more complicated ones might, but is that bourgeois power is not really there. It is substituted by the state, as of these other classes. But there's also not really a clear proletarian interest because they're not truly wage earners. So that these other factions and tensions rise up that explain the class conflict within the Soviet Union. So it is an analogy to this, but it's not a perfect one. And it's hard to know what Trotsky was aware of. Also, Trotsky, I don't want to sound like a total Trotskyist. He, like, for a long time, gets stuff wrong. Like, you can hear him railing against Bukharin and thinking Stalin might be reformable, you know, in the 30s. So, you know, he was wrong there. So I don't want to say it's perfect. But the tendency, one of the things that late Trotsky says is, like, he doesn't think that it would have been a whole lot better if he'd have been in charge of the Soviet Union because of the class formations of the Soviet Union and the need to keep petty proprietors as a core of the technocratic leadership, would have led to him being a Bonapartist figure too.
Which is very contrary to the usual sort of folk understanding of Trotsky, right?
Yeah, I mean, even Hillel Tickton, who should know better, like, thought Trotsky was wrong about himself there. Like, he just thought Stalin, was uniquely historically bad. And
Hillel Tickton has also been asked not to speak on his opinions about politics by the CPGB because of well, I wonder why that is, actually. I think they say it's because he has kind of ortho-trot sort of tendencies and ortho-Bolshevik tendencies, but I kind of wonder.
Well, I think he probably does, except that he is willing to say Trotsky is not ortho-Trotsky enough, which is kind of funny.
Well, didn't Marx say he wasn't a Marxist?
Yeah, but too impossibilist. Cough, cough, cough.
He is so unlike your Christ. So something that resonates with this kind of Bonapartist stuff is the way that, and I understand in historical context that anarchism and socialism hadn't had their like big split yet, yada, yada. First International, I know. But here, all classes and parties had united in the party of order against the proletarian class as the party of anarchy, of socialism, of communism. How in the revolution, these things are all going to be kind of part of one thing. Like, these aren't like tendencies that are going to be easily kind of like delineated and separated.
Well, I mean, one of the things I talk about, I'm going to, on Pop the Left soon, I'm going to do an episode on Ferdinand Lassalle, assuming we don't all die. And one of the things I realized is like, one of the things that pissed Ingalls off at Kautsky, even though Ingalls largely endorsed the Alfred program, was that one of the same things that Marx critiqued Lassalle for was over-reliance on the state and nationalization for their socialist programs, which I find fascinating because before 1848, Marx was pro that too. Mm-hmm. Right? If you actually read the Communist Manifesto, like there's a whole lot of nationalization stuff in there. After 1848, he's not. And he was much more sympathetic to general stateless actors. Although he, later on he forms a kind of stage theory about removing the state. But at this point, like he's very frustrated with nationalizations and state projects.
Okay, are we kind of done? Is there any kind of general stuff people want to say, or anything more on that last final paragraph?
We could talk about how the slogans of these anti-socialist property, family, religion, order slogans end up becoming an engine for bourgeois fanatics for order.
Well, they're the same slogans that still exist today, aren't they? They're nearly identical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
No change in content. Like literally zero change in content.
Or zero change in form, maybe a huge change in content. Like what they mean by family is something very, very different.
That's true. That's true.
And
what do you mean by that, Derek?
Well, the nuclear family is not the family that they would have been fighting to keep together. They would have been fighting something more like the
clan,
the clan patriarchal model. And one of the reasons, for that is interesting because it's a different time period of bourgeois production where, an agrarian family and getting around like wage labor and all that isn't going to be useful to you. Whereas back then it still would have been. So what I love about this is it points out that while the content doesn't seem to change, it's actually so damn vague that it can pretty much always be appealed to.
But the form of the family is different, and property now includes property includes a server farm or something, and order property might include drones.
Right. Well, property includes also like a whole lot of stuff that's IP, which is not commodity property.
But there was copyright back then as well, wasn't there?
Yeah.
There's
same forms.
Well, yeah, but it being used in the way we use it, they didn't see that. We didn't see that till about 30 years ago. Like the fact that increasingly everything is in the form of rents. Like that's a way to get past the declining rate of profit and commodity production is to just lock everything in rent form until the economy crashes.
Well, it's not because you can't. It's just a way of siphoning surplus from certain sectors. It doesn't overall increase the rate of profit.
No, it doesn't. But it does make it seem like there's profit. It's a pretty good deception mechanism.
Yeah, in certain sectors, yeah.
I.e. tech, and i.e. finance, where like half of us work.
Yeah, it's just monopoly, isn't it? Monopoly power. Okay, well, there's one thing I kind of wanted to say. I can't remember where it was we were talking about it. Like, maybe it was when we were talking about like the weakness of the July monarchy. But like, it's kind of it kind of reminds me of just looking at the Sanders stuff at the moment. I know this sounds maybe cringy, but like the Democratic leadership itself just seems like the party itself just seems like really overripe and ready for something to happen to it. Any instincts from reading this stuff on American politics?
Bloomberg wanted to be Krapulinski but couldn't pull it off.
I mean, the same logic is at play, but it doesn't mean the conditions are the same, right?
it just like Biden, like like imagine Biden as that's what you said at the end of the last recording, wasn't it? The 18th premiere of Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's right.
When I edited that, I was laughing again. It just keeps coming back to me when we're reading this stuff.
Glad I could have a witty phrase here and there.
So,
In
is there
order
anything else
to prevent Trump from being reelected, it would take something as severe as coronavirus, I guess. Maybe even then.
Well, do we have a lot of like Marxists like writing about the Spanish flu, like that kind of thing?
Actually, I was actually looking at, so someone's like, are we in another revolutionary crisis? And I'm like, I can't think of where a plague or a pandemic led to a revolutionary crisis until there's actually abundance 10 years later from all the deaths. Seriously.
What about the ones after World War I? Like, could you wrap up that in the Spanish flu as well as World War?
You might can, but again, that's another like aftermath of creating space issue, where like you see an economic boom, but it doesn't go to everyone. One of the other things that I've been pointing out as everyone's been talking about this workers' movement stuff, workers' movements really only grow during boom times because it's harder to scab. And that's, particularly really interestingly when there's like crappy boom times, like the last current one, it makes good sense why there's a workers' movement because there wasn't enough stuff going downward for people to really feel like they were benefiting, but there was enough jobs that people like didn't feel the need to scab on one another. So you did see a slight uptick in unionization, and that's totally predictable. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think we don't really have a model for this, and I have no idea what it's going to do electorally. Like, I tend to think maybe we overestimate how much this may destroy Trump because some of his voter base don't care. But also, a lot of that base are going to be the people who have the highest death rates from this if it hits their community. So I got no idea. Like, I have no idea how this is going to go.
Well, and we just talked about this, Tom and Shane and I, but the real issue is what's the fallout of the financial crisis that this provokes?
Yeah, because I think while they have bought us some time with that $1.5 trillion injection, they have not reversed the situation, and all the stock analysts are saying stocks are going to be volatile as fuck for the next year. And bonds are being weird at moments now, and cryptos don't know what's going on. I mean, like everything is on fire. Furthermore, like the consumer economy is going to be, and like limping along for, people are saying emergency measures for a week or two, and I'm like, this is like every epidemiologist says this is going to be at least 3 months.
Yeah,
we haven't seen that in America since the Great Depression. So, and in Canada either. And I don't think like Europe's different because the world wars caused that, but we didn't even stop down for that during the world wars. So like I don't know.
Yeah.
We have no idea what's coming.
Yeah,
I do.
I
do.
Okay,
I've seen the documentary series The Walking Dead. Have you not seen that documentary series?
Well, just to actually answer your point a little bit, like the Democrats are weak, but the old is dead, but the new has not yet been born.
Right. This is exactly what that is, man. We are in weird, awful transition times.
The other thing is like that the fallout from this, the really bad fallout, mightn't actually happen until after the election for Trump in November.
Yeah, that's what I'm actually thinking. And if we have Biden coming in, and until a few days ago, I thought all this stuff was normal gaff machine stuff. The last few days, I don't know what's causing it, and I refuse to say it's dementia or sundowning or something, but like something's wrong. Like I've seen the man speak in person, and these Zoom videos and stuff he's doing, they're scary. So who knows? I mean, I don't think there's a way for Sanders to win anymore either. So I have no idea what's going to happen. Also, they're all over 70. They're primed. They're primed to get.
Oh yeah.
To get coronavirus and die. And if Bolsonaro himself wasn't, at least one of his cabinet members was carrying, and a lot of people who met with them have come down with the virus. So oh my God, who knows what's going to happen? We have no idea.
The thing with Joe Biden that makes it look so bad, I feel, is that he squints and he's like looking in the distance, like he's trying to see through cataracts. Like it's like an expression on his face that's nearly the worst thing that makes him look confused.
I don't know. I think the worst part is when he mumbles how we need to re-elect this November. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw him speak 2 years ago, and he did not sound like that.
He could just be exhausted as well, It could actually be really tough on the body.
It could be stress, but the thing is, I don't. But whenever we talk about the gerontocracy of the Soviet Union, I'm just going to say Brezhnev was already dead before he was Trump's age.
Yeah.
Our gerontocracy is gerontocracy or whatever.
The best that science will allow.
Yes.
Right then, let's sign off. See that we've gone into just bullshit talking.
Like we always do.
Yeah, and it was my fault.
No, this is the good stuff.
What about the Democrats?
This is the subscriber. If we were a normal monetizing podcast, this is the subscriber only section. Where
or literally all I've been doing for the last 3 days. Everyone's like, come and talk about coronavirus, and I'm like, okay.
Sorry, I missed that with General Intellect Unit and you, Tom. That sounded like a fun one.
Yeah, that could have been.
It got pretty wild. Tom was on one, really. Yeah.
I'm turned into a Stalinist. I'm telling you. Right. Let's bring it off here. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Now let's take it off here. And she will see us all next week for chapter 2. Booyaka Shah.
Yeah. Let's see who survives for next week.